Good morning, everybody, here in the church and online. This morning, our lesson comes from Revelation, chapter 5, verses 1 through 10. I'm going to go ahead and read those verses, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. It said, "Then I saw the right hand of him who sat on the throne, a scroll with writing on both sides, and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, 'Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?' But no one in heaven or on earth or under earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, 'Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals.' Then I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by 4 living creatures and the elders. The lamb had seven horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. He went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. And when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's people. And they sang a new song, saying, 'You are worthy to take the scroll and to open the seals, because you were slain, and with your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on earth.'" So when I saw where this was going to be coming from today, the lesson, I was kind of excited. I like Revelation. I've read it countless times. Do I understand a lot of it? No, I don't. I've always found it very interesting, just how it's kind of laid out. Of course, it was basically a revelation to John. He had visions of what it was. Revelation 4 and 5 narrate the Apostle John's vision of the divine throne room. This vision immediately follows the appearance of someone like a son of man, who dictates letters to 7 churches in the province of Asia Minor. These letters offer both encouragement and caution to churches that range from being faithful to unfaithful. 2 good questions to ask in many life situations are, what so and so what? The older I get, I find myself a lot of times thinking, what am I doing here? Well, what are we doing? Particularly at work a lot. Like, what am I doing this for? What's the point? And I'm sure the boss man gets tired of me saying that to him. And he wants my old grouchy self to go on, which I'm going to sooner than later. So, but it's a good thing to know, what are you doing? The things you're doing, why are you doing them? Revelation 1 through 3 establishes the fact regarding the status of 7 churches. In answer to the second question, the visions of Revelation 4 and following describe rewards and consequences. This allows us to see God's authority and power, the reality that he remains in charge, even when earthly events would suggest otherwise. So just reading that applies probably now more than it ever has, because there's a lot of people that love to question the authority of this God we talk about. Of course, we know this God is the God. People love, we're a reactionary society. Whatever's going on today is the biggest thing that's ever happened, ever, to a lot of people. Not that you can read history books and see there were times when it was, a whole lot more important stuff going on. But that's how human beings think. It says John's vision begins in Revelation 4:1 with a glimpse of God in his throne room. John witnesses startling and glorious things: precious stones, elders with crowns, fiery lamps, creatures who worship God day and night. John's vision zooms in to focus on a specific object. So this is kind of where we start these verses at. Verse 1, it said, "Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals." So it says a scroll is typically made from flattened papyrus or animal skins and is opened and closed by being unrolled and rolled. We've all seen it, just from being in church, and you see illustrations of different things. But in the ancient world, that's how they wrote down stuff. They didn't have books. The description of the document as having writing on both sides to it is unusual. They didn't usually write on both sides of it. Most scrolls were written on only on one side, but lengthy documents could take up both sides. The fact that the scroll has writing on it front and back signals its contents, the breadth and depth, or both. So it's a really important document. So the focus on Revelation 5 is not on the actual contents of the scroll, but the fact that it is sealed with 7 seals. Of course, we see the number 7, is a very important number in the Bible. It says, "These are often sealed to prevent someone from reading or tampering with their contents." A seal in this context would normally consist of hot wax poured over threads that tied the scroll in its rolled up state. Legal documents would have several seals indicating several witnesses. And these witnesses often use a signet ring to press in the wax for self-identification. So we've all kind of seen that before in different kind of movies or even talking about the Bible. This made it impossible to open the scroll without detection of tampering. So if that seal's broken, it's been looked at already or tampered with in some way. It says many students believe that the number 7 stands for perfection or completeness based on how it's used elsewhere in the Bible. So if Jesus is the one that opens it, he was perfection. Verse 2 says, And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scrolls?" The dramatic action in the rest of this scene is set up by the proclamation of a mighty angel, he's unnamed. It doesn't say which angel or who it is. The use of the word worthy makes this question not so much an open invitation as a rhetorical challenge. The term worthy in this context encompasses not just moral excellence, but also signifies someone who possesses the authority and power to break the seals. So there again, the number 7, it is someone who's perfect and has earned the right to open it. Verse 3 says, "But no one in heaven or on earth or under earth could open the scroll or even look inside it." The search for someone worthy seems at first to fail. The mention of heaven, earth, and under earth was a typical method of depicting the domain of heavenly beings, earthly beings, in the world of the deceased. But no focus on the scientific nature of each of the 3 locations is to miss. But to focus on the location of the 3 locations is to miss the bigger picture. The bigger picture is anywhere you can think of. So there's nobody out there that can open this seal but Jesus. Every part of creation has been explored and no one qualified has been found yet. So it just shows the special status that is Christ. Verse 4 says, "I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside it." Wept and wept is an intense form of grief. You hear about a lot of people in the Bible weeping. This is talking about wept and wept, so it's a amplified type of grief. The ancient Greek words translated as such are found elsewhere in the New Testament. The sense can be one of the duration of the weeping or depth of distress, or both. And so you think, why is he so upset, John? One theory that might explain his reaction concerns what he was told at the beginning of the throne room scene. He was told that future events would be revealed to him. You know, he's having this vision. This is what he thinks he's seeing all this stuff for. So, you know, he really wants to know. It says, if John connects the scroll's comments with knowledge of future events, and no one can open the scroll, then the promise would not be fulfilled. Even he, John, was not worthy to open the scroll or look inside. So he really wants to know what it says. Verse 5 says, then one of the elders said to me, do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah and root of David has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals. So it says John is comforted by one of the 24 elders present around God's throne. Someone is indeed worthy. The lion of the tribe of Judah comes from Genesis, where Jacob refers to his son Judah as a lion's cub and compares him to a lion that no one dares rouse. It says this metaphor is immediately followed by the promise that Judah will always have the right of rulership. The other designation, the root of David, confirms that the Messiah is in view. Of course, this description comes from Isaiah. It says the specific title in Isaiah is the root of Jesse, Jesse having been the father of David. Isaiah prophesied how the Messiah will bring justice and peace to the earth and unity to the nations. The designation, the root and offspring of David, is explicitly claimed by Jesus near the book's end. So it's just kind of verifying, you know, that who Jesus is. Of course, we all know who he is. You know, he came out of the right root. You know, he is out of the right ancestral background to be the Messiah. The one who is both lion and root has the right to open the scroll because he has triumphed. So the narrative doesn't tell us at this point what that victory is, but the coupling of his word with the imagery of the regal lion implies a conquering king. The reader expects someone as mighty as a lion to enter the scene. You know, can you imagine seeing all this stuff that he was seeing? You know, and it's a great. I like it when they make metaphors to stuff. You know, I was born in the 70s, but I'm an 80s child, 90s child. It's all about, you know, I've seen a bunch of movies and stuff, and I love to be able to see the images of this stuff, and you just could kind of see like this conquering hero that comes, and it's you know, he's called the Lion of Judah. You know, who in here wants to mess with a lion? Nobody. You know, he is the king. Obviously, we call him the king of the jungle. It says only Christ had the proper credentials, the authorization to open the seals and scroll. His credentials included his birthright as a lion from the tribe of Judah and the root of David. But it was his action of laying down his life that completed his credentials as the only one qualified to open the scroll. So Jesus dying on the cross, suffering for us, of course, and then being raised on the third day, he's qualified. He's it. Verse 6a says, then I saw a lamb looking as it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. The reader first encounters the 4 living creatures and the elders earlier in Revelation 4. The word creature implies that these beings are neither human nor angels. In the book of Revelation, the number 4 is symbolic of the entirety of the earth and its inhabitants. Combining that observation with the creature's multitude of eyes indicates that they are watching the entire earth. Nothing is hidden from them. This symbolizes the all-knowing nature of the Lord and his omnipotence. So a lot through Revelation, they talk about these different creatures and stuff, and it's kind of hard for us to, or for me to kind of get my head around exactly what they are. But is it more symbolism they're talking about? Is it an actual creature? Somebody that's got a better degree than mine could probably tell you all that stuff. But it just kind of brings in a more focus as to what this scene is he's seeing. It says the spotlight focuses on a lamb now. This is a startling plot twist, especially given the lamb's outward appearance. It bears the marks of having been slain, yet it lives, given that it is standing. A metaphor is used here to represent Christ, who was killed but resurrected. The image of the slain lamb recalls the Old Testament concept of blood sacrifice. Yet the lamb in John's vision didn't remain dead. It's depicted alive, bearing visible, serious wounds. The New Testament uses the capitalized word lamb or lambs some 35 times. All but 2 of those are in the book of Revelation. So I read that for you, Jerry. This book loves to talk about how many times a word's used in a book, but but here it's interesting. Most of the time, the lamb is talked about in Revelation. You would think it'd be talked about more, like during the crucifixion in those times. But Jesus truly represented the Lamb of God. 6b says the Lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into the earth. So here again we see the number 7, which symbolizes perfection and completeness. The horns symbolize power, and the eyes symbolize divine knowledge. The exact meaning of the 7 spirits of God is difficult to determine. Some students take this phrase to be the same as the 7-fold spirit depicted in Isaiah. This viewpoint allows a reference to the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Trinity. Another viewpoint understands the 7 spirits to refer to God's 7 angels, which is talked about later on in Revelation. Some ancient Jewish texts mention 7 archangels that stand before God's throne. And there's a non-biblical text that says, it speaks of Raphael, one of the 7 holy angels who presents the saints' prayers and stands before God, before the glory of God. Translators have to make a choice here to translate a lowercase spirit rather than an uppercase spirit. It reveals a belief that does not refer to a deity. This is the choice made by the translators of the New International Version. In either case, the fact that spirit served the Lamb's purpose shows his power and authority. So, it kind of gets in the weeds a little bit there about what the Spirit is and more of a theological debate. There's no doubt that there's angels around the throne. We understand angels in our belief and what they're all about. But it also, like it says at the end of that, it shows the Lamb's power and authority. Verse 7 said, he went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. So the Lamb demonstrates his worthiness by receiving the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. All present, including John, undoubtedly watched in amazement as the Lamb did this audacious thing. However, this is not an act of thievery or usurpation. It's a big word. You can use that one, Paul. Shows how smart you are. For God has been waiting for the Lamb. The scroll and its contents belong to the Lamb. So the person who can break the seals just showed up. And he gave him the scroll. Verse 8a says, and when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. So now everybody realizes who he is. With the translation of the scroll, worship in heaven resumes. the transfer of the scroll. But now the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders bow before the Lamb. This is not to recognize a transfer of power that diminishes the authority of the one on the throne, but it recognizes the Lamb's authority and his unity with the one on the throne. So we're kind of seeing the, God the Father and, and the Son here. The number of elders, 24, is double the number 12, of course. I went to Westmore and I know that. Which may represent the people of God from both the Old and New Testaments. Israel, the covenant people of the Old Testament era, was comprised of 12 tribes, of course. Christians, the covenant people of the New Testament era, are linked with the 12 apostles, who are the foundation of the church. Jesus himself combines the idea of 12 tribes and 12 apostles in his description of the future in Matthew. So, we see here that Jesus is the one that brings it all together. And I've said this before, the Bible is all about him, if you read it in that way. It's all about him coming. It's all about him fulfilling the covenant that God has with us. 8b says, each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's people. It said the elders each now have a harp, which they presumably use for worship music, given that harps were common as an instrument of worship. Harps are also mentioned in later on in Revelation. So, every time you see a depiction of like heaven, you always see people with harps strumming them, It's always thought was kind of odd, but I can't play nothing. So, if you've ever seen anybody play a harp, it is kind of interesting. The fact that the elders also hold gold bowls full of incense offers the reader a rarity in this book of Revelation. The 2 words, which are, these 2 words indicate an explanation of the symbolism. That symbolism comes next. The which are or is language explains symbolism with more symbolism usually in Revelations, but that isn't the case here. Given the unambiguous identification of the prayers of God's people, the context implies that the Lamb receives those prayers, and he does not ignore them. So I thought that was kind of interesting that it actually explained to us, what's going on with the prayers and the bowls, because like it says a lot in Revelation, it's a lot of symbolism, and some of it's up for interpretation. Verse 9a says, and they sang a new song. Worship of the Lamb includes singing, whether you can sing or not, right? Like Paul was talking about earlier. You're supposed to make a joyful noise. Every time I think about that, I think about Preacher Joe and talking about if you can't carry a tune in a bucket, just bring your bucket. So we're called to make a joyful noise to the Lord. He likes that praise. It says this imperative is stressed throughout the Psalms. Revelation 14:3 is an additional implementation. However, in that instant, it's the 144,000 redeemed who are singing while the 4 beasts and the elders apparently listen. 9b, not the rest of that verse, 9b says, saying, you are worthy to take the scroll and to open the seals because you were slain, and with your blood you were purchased for God. So I'd like to hear what that song really sounded like. Obviously it wasn't in English because it doesn't rhyme. But it would be, I'd like to hear what that noise actually was. I'm sure it was something you can't explain and was good. The reality that the Lamb had been slain would have been perceived as a source of embarrassment by many. But the heavenly court praises the Lamb not in spite of his death, but because of it. This is where it's different. Christ's obedient death is humanity's victory over sin, guilt. So that's what our whole faith is based on, what Christ did. The Lamb's unique obedience to the Father made him worthy to take the book and open its seal. The heavenly court then explains the implications of the death further. Primary is the truth that it purchased us for God. the verb translated purchase occurs, here you go, Jared, about 30 times in the New Testament. It also refers to a purchase that involves an exchange. Such purchases can refer to paying a price to free someone, like going to bond, in modern day times. That's the sense here. That's Christ ultimately did that for us. He did pay the price, of course. He got us out of the bondage of sin. 9c says, persons from every tribe and language and people and nation. And the song now recognizes the diverse nature of who have been redeemed. The diversity is fourfold in that they come from every family, group, tribe, every language group, every demographic, people, and every ethnic group, nation. This heavenly mix is drawn from the entire world. So Christ opened the door for everybody that wants to walk through it. Verse 10a says, you have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God. It says this half verse yields three minor problems regarding the original author's words per the various Greek manuscripts. The first challenge concerns the word them. It's the Greek word translated us instead. This may have been a scribe's intent to match the word to the diverse group that we were just speaking about. The second minor challenge is that the phrase of our God appears is in only some manuscripts. The third challenge is that some manuscripts have the Greek word for kings instead of kingdom. In Revelation 1 also has kings instead of kingdom in a manuscript variant. So that's evidence for the word kings. However, Exodus speaks of a kingdom of priests, which seems to be the anecdote or pattern for the issue. In any case, we will be treated like royalty when God's kingdom is manifested in its fullness. Note the golden crowns the elders are wearing here in Revelation. Offering certain parallels and directions to this half verse before us is also referred to in Isaiah, Peter, and Revelation again later on. So, like I said, there's some stuff that's ambiguous, and people, they like to kind of squabble over one thing or the other, what it really means. But at the end of the day, we are going to be God's royalty. Isn't that something kind of cool to think about? Not being royalty, but, we're kind of going to be VIP people, which I think is very, very neat. Verse 10b says, and they will reign on the earth. To serve as a royal priesthood comes with a promise. God's people will one day reign on the earth. Christ made this promise explicitly in a letter to the church of, I can't pronounce it, so we're not going to butcher that. And it appears elsewhere in the New Testament as well. This is an astonishing and humbling responsibility. Of course it is. It's part of our job and part of what we're supposed to be doing as Christians is to, further God's kingdom. Tell people about Jesus. Like the event yesterday. That's a great way to do stuff like that. Some people that don't know anything you're talking about, they see that and, they kind of want to start picking up what you're putting down. They get more curious about it and they really don't even understand why, but it's the power of God that's working. In conclusion, it says, in God's economy, earthly success does not draw his praise. Ultimately, Jesus alone is worthy of all glory and honor. He alone is worthy to unbind the scroll. While Jesus will always reign supreme, we will be honored by being called to reign with him. But our worthiness will be tested. And it says we should expect it. The thought to remember says Jesus alone is worthy of all honor and praise. Of course, I feel like this place we've always been about that. Jesus Christ is what it's all about. It's what Christianity is all about. It's what the truth is, no matter what kind of other truth you hear every day or people talking about truth. The truth is Jesus Christ and what he did for us. Remember, he's the only one that can break those seals, and he's the only way we can get to the Father. That's all I got for today. Hope everybody has a good week. Thanks for bearing with me through Revelation. Better than Deuteronomy.